The wind carried dust and memories across the frontier town of Cedar Ridge, where weathered buildings stood like sentinels against the endless prairie sky. Thomas McCready adjusted his worn hat as he watched his 8-year-old daughter Lucy chase a butterfly near the general store. Her laughter, the only bright sound in a world that had grown too quiet since her mother's passing 2 years ago. He'd built a good life Harris small ranch on the outskirts of town. Enough cattle to keep food on the table and the respect of his neighbors. But Lucy needed more than he could give her. She needed a mother's gentle touch, someone to braid her hair and teach her the things a man couldn't. The thought weighed heavy on his heart as he watched her play alone. Always alone. That's when he saw her. The woman sat hunched against the side of Murphy's saloon. Her once fine dress now tattered and stained with the harsh realities of life. On the streets, her dark hair hung in tangled waves around a face that spoke of both beauty and suffering. She clutched a small bundle to her chest. Everything she owned, Thomas realized with a pang of recognition. He'd seen that look before, in the eyes of settlers who'd lost everything to drought, disease, or cruel fortune. "Papa, who is that lady?" Lucy's voice broke through his thoughts. She'd stopped chasing the butterfly and now stared at the woman with the curious innocence of childhood. "Someone who's having a hard time, sweetheart," Thomas said softly. Taking his daughter's hand, the woman looked up then, and their eyes met across the dusty street. Hers were the color of storm clouds, gray and turbulent, but there was something else, their spark of dignity that poverty couldn't extinguish. She straightened slightly, as if preparing to endure whatever judgment might come her way. Thomas felt something stir in his chest. Something he'd thought buried with his beloved Sarah. Not love that was too precious and rare to come so quickly, but recognition. Here was someone fighting to survive, just as he'd fought to rebuild after Sarah's death. Here was someone who understood loss. "Come on, Lucy," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Let's go talk to her." The woman's name was Elena Vasquez, and her story unfolded like a map of heartbreak across the American frontier. She'd been married to a man who'd promised her the world only to lose everything to gambling and drink. When the consumption took him last winter, it left her with nothing but debts and the clothes on her back. "I've been walking for weeks," she told Thomas, as they sat in the small diner. Lucy between them, sharing her apple pie with shy generosity. "Looking for work, for anywhere that might take me in, but a woman alone, ... She let the sentence hang. And Thomas understood. The frontier was hard on everyone, but it was especially cruel to women without protection. "Can you cook?" he found himself asking, though he hadn't planned the words. Elena's eyes widened. "Yes, sir. I can cook, clean, mend clothes. I worked in my family's restaurant before I married. I'm not afraid of hard work." "Papa makes terrible biscuits," Lucy announced solemnly, and despite everything, Elena smiled, the first real smile Thomas had seen from her. That smile changed everything. "I have a proposition," Thomas said, his heart hammering against his ribs. "My daughter needs a mother's care, and you need a home. It wouldn't be a real marriage, not a... First, just an arrangement. You'd have a roof over your head, food to eat, and Lucy would have someone to look after her proper. In time, if we both felt it was right," he couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the hope that had taken root in his chest like prairie. Grass after rain. Elena was quiet for a long moment, studying Lucy's earnest face, then Thomas's weathered features. She saw kindness there and strength, and something else, loneliness, that matched her own. "When?" she asked simply. They were married 3 days later by the circuit preacher, with half the town gathered in the little white church. It wasn't a wedding born of passion, but of necessity, though Thomas couldn't help but notice how beautiful Elena looked in Sarah's wedding dress, which the town ladies had altered to fit her smaller frame. Lucy stood between them during the ceremony, her small hands clasped in both of theirs. A bridge between two hearts, learning to trust again. The first months were awkward, full of careful politeness and unspoken boundaries. Lena slept in the spare room, rising before dawn to make breakfast and tend to Lucy's needs. She transformed their rough bachelor household into a real home. hanging curtains she'd sewn from flour sacks and filling the cabin with the scents of fresh bread and wildflowers. Thomas watched it all with wonder and growing affection. The way Alina taught Lucy to braid her hair, sitting patiently on the porch steps in the evening light. The way she hummed Spanish lullabies while she worked, unconsciously filling the silence that had haunted their home for too long. The way she never complained about the hard life, never spoke of the comfortable home she'd lost, but it was the small moments that undid him. The way she saved him the best pieces of meat at dinner. The way she mended his shirts with tiny, careful stitches. The way she'd grown to anticipate his needs, having coffee ready when he came in from the range, a warm meal waiting no matter how late he worked, and Lucy. Lucy bloomed like a desert flower after rain. She learned to giggle again, to play dress-up with Elena's few remaining finery. She began to call Alina Mama without being asked, and Elena's eyes would grow bright with unshed tears every time. Thomas began to fall in love with his wife of convenience, and he suspected she felt something too, in the way her smile lingered. When she looked at him, in the way she'd touch his hand briefly when passing him his coffee. But he'd promised her safety, not love. He'd promised her refuge, not the complications of a real marriage. So he kept his growing feelings locked away, afraid to risk the fragile peace they'd built. The trouble started when Elena's past came looking for her. Frank Morrison had been her late husband's gambling partner, and he arrived in Cedar Ridge on a dusty Thursday, his pale eyes scanning the town like a predator seeking prey. Thomas was in the barn when Alina came running, her face white with terror. "He's here," she gasped, clutching Lucy to her side. "Frank Morrison, he says. He says Miguel owed him money. A lot of money, and now that debt is mine." Thomas felt something cold and dangerous unfurl in his chest. "How much?" $300? Elena's voice broke. "Thomas, I don't have that kind of money. Nobody does. He says if I can't pay, ... She didn't need to finish. Thomas understood the threat. In Morrison's pale eyes, had seen men like him before, men who took what they wanted and justified it later. "Take Lucy to the Hendersons," Thomas said quietly, reaching for his gun belt. "Tell them to keep her safe until this is over." "No," Elena's voice was fierce. "I won't let you fight my battles. This is my debt, my problem. I'll go with him. It's the only way to keep you and Lucy safe." The words hit Thomas like a physical blow. The thought of losing Alana to Morrison's cruelty, to a life that would destroy her spirit, was unbearable. In that moment, he realized how completely she'd captured his heart, how the arrangement born of necessity had become the truest love he'd ever known. "Like hell you will," he said, pulling her into his arms for the first time since their wedding. "Day, you're my wife, Alina, my real wife in every way that matters. I'll be damned if I let Morrison or anyone else take you from us." Alina looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Thomas, I love you. I've loved you for months, but I was afraid to say it. Afraid you'd think I was trying to trap you into more than you'd bargained for." "You haven't trapped me," Thomas whispered, cupping her face in his work-rough hands. "You've saved me, both of us. You've made us a family, Alina, a real family." Their first real kiss tasted of tears and hope and promises yet to be made. The confrontation with Morrison came at sunset, the golden hour when the frontier sky burned like molten copper. Thomas walked down Cedar Ridge's main street with the measured pace of a man who'd made his peace with whatever came next. Alina waited on the porch of their home, Lucy safely hidden at the neighbor's, her heart hammering with fear for the man she'd come to love more than her own life. Morrison stood in the middle of the street, his hand resting casually on his gun. "McCready," he called out, "this doesn't have to be your fight. Just hand over the woman and her debt, and we can all go about our business." "The woman is my wife," Thomas replied, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "And her debts are mine now. I don't pay extortion to scum like you." Morrison's laugh was ugly. Her husband was a cheat and a coward. Killed himself rather than face what he owed. "Sure you want to die for his widow? Die for her?" "Gladly," Thomas said, and meant it. "But I'd rather live for her, and that means you're going to climb back on your horse and ride out of my town, Morrison. Now." The gunfight was brief and decisive. Morrison was fast, But Thomas was faster, and he was fighting for everything that mattered. When the smoke cleared, Morrison lay still in the dust, and Thomas stood unharmed, his hands steady, despite the trembling in his heart. Alina ran to him then, her careful composure finally breaking. She threw herself into his arms, sobbing with relief and love and the overwhelming joy of a woman who'd found her home at last. "It's over," Thomas whispered into her hair, holding her as if he'd never let go. "It's over, me, Amor. We're safe." That night, for the first time since their wedding, Alina didn't sleep in the spare room. The seasons turned and their love grew deeper with each passing day. Thomas would watch Alina working in the garden she'd planted behind the cabin, her dark hair gleaming in the sun, and marveled at the path that had brought her to him. She'd come to Cedar Ridge with nothing, a broken woman fleeing her past. And somehow she'd given him everything: love, laughter, hope for the future. Lucy thrived under Elena's gentle care, growing tall and strong and beautiful with her father's steady nature and her stepmother's warm heart. On quiet evenings, the three of them would sit on the porch, watching the sun set over the endless prairie while Elena's voice rose and fell in stories of her childhood in New Mexico, of festivals and family, and the grandfather who'd taught her to see beauty in even the harshest landscape. "Tell me again how you and Papa met," Lucy would beg, settling more comfortably between her parents. Alina would smile and look at Thomas, love shining in her storm-gray eyes. "Your papa saw a woman who needed help," she'd say, "and he opened his heart and his home to a stranger. He gave me the greatest gift anyone can give. He gave me a family." "And what did Alina give us?" Thomas would ask, playing his part in their familiar ritual. "Hope," Lucy would answer solemnly. "Alina gave us hope." Thomas would nod, pulling both his girls closer. "That's right, sweetheart. Alina gave us hope." But privately, he knew it was so much more than that. Alina had given them love, not the desperate, grasping kind born of loneliness, but the steady, enduring love that grew stronger with each shared sunrise, each weathered storm, each small act of daily devotion. The second spring after their marriage brought unexpected news. Alina was pregnant, her body carrying new life as surely as the prairie carried wildflowers after the long winter. Thomas was overcome with joy, though Alina worried about bringing a child into their still fragile circumstances. "What if something happens to you in childbirth?" she whispered one night, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly. "If I can't be the mother Lucy needs, and the mother this baby deserves?" "You already are," Thomas assured her, his own hand covering hers. "Lucy loves you completely. And this baby, ... He paused, searching for the right words. "This baby is living proof that love can create new beginnings, even in the hardest places." The pregnancy wasn't easy. Alina was sick through the first months, unable to keep food down, growing pale and thin despite Thomas's worried care. The doctor was 60 miles away in the county seat, too far to summon for anything less than a dire emergency. But the women of Cedar Ridge rallied around their newest member. Mrs. Henderson brought soup and advice. The preacher's wife shared her collection of baby clothes, lovingly saved from her own children's infancy. Even the saloon girls, rough women with soft hearts, contributed blankets and tiny booties knitted with surprising skill. Alina was overwhelmed by the kindness, tears streaming down her face as she held each gift. "I never thought I'd have this again," she confided to Thomas. "A community. People who cared whether I lived or died. You have it now," he promised. "Forever." Baby Samuel Thomas McCready was born on a snowy February morning, entering the world with a lusty cry that seemed to announce his intention to live life fully and joyously. Alina labored for 16 hours, with Thomas holding her hand and Lucy sleeping fitfully in the next room. But when their son finally arrived, perfect and healthy, the pain was forgotten in the wonder of new life. "He looks like you," Alina whispered, exhausted but radiant as she held their child. "He has your stubbornness," Thomas replied, gently touching the baby's tiny fist. "Look how he's already trying to boss us around." Lucy was enchanted with her baby brother, appointed herself his protector, and insisted on helping with every aspect of his care. Cabin rang with laughter and baby sounds, the music of a family complete. But even in their happiness, the frontier demanded its price. The winter was harsh, and several families in the area lost livestock to the cold. The railroad brought changes to Cedar Ridge, some good and some troubling. New people arrived weekly, not all of them seeking honest work. Through it all, Thomas and Elena's love remained their anchor. They faced each challenge together, their bond deepened by shared purpose and tested by adversity. When drought threatened their crops, they worked side by side to save what they could. When Lucy fell ill with fever, they took turns sitting by her bedside through the long nights until she recovered. The real test came when Samuel was 6 months old, and Elena received a letter that changed everything. It was from a lawyer in Santa Fe, informing her that her grandfather, the one whose stories had filled so many of their evening hours, had died, leaving her a substantial inheritance, not just money, but land. A beautiful hacienda near the mountains where she'd grown up, complete with orchards and gardens and room for a dozen children. "We could go back," Elena said quietly, reading the letter for the third time. "Take the children somewhere safe, somewhere beautiful. Give them advantages we can't provide here." Thomas felt his heart constrict. The inheritance was more than they'd ever dreamed of, enough to secure their children's futures beyond anything Cedar Ridge could offer. But it would also mean leaving everything he'd built, everything he knew. "Is that what you want?" he asked carefully. Elena was quiet for a long moment, looking around their simple cabin. At Lucy, playing with the baby on the quilt-covered floor, at the life they'd built together in this hard but beloved place. "I want to be wherever you are," she said finally. "Cedar Ridge, Santa Fe, or the moon itself. This isn't about money or comfort, Thomas. It's about family. It's about home." "Then we stay," Thomas said, pulling her into his arms. "We stay, and we build something here. Together." Elena smiled. The kind of smile that had first captured his heart in Murphy's saloon that day so long ago. "Together," she agreed. Use part of the inheritance to improve their ranch, to help their neighbors through the drought, to build a proper school for Cedar Ridge's growing population of children. The rest they saved for Lucy and Samuel's futures, whatever form those might take. Years passed in the gentle rhythm of frontier life. Lucy grew into a beautiful young woman with her father's steady strength and her stepmother's compassionate heart. Samuel became a sturdy boy who could ride before he could properly walk, equally at home with his father's cattle and his mother's stories. Lena never regretted her choice to stay. Cedar Ridge was home now, not because of the place, but because of the people, her family, her community, the life they'd built together through love and determination. Sometimes in the quiet moments before dawn, she would lie in Thomas's arms and remember that desperate woman who'd once sat against the saloon wall with nothing but the clothes on her back and the hope that someone somewhere might show her kindness. Thomas had given her so much more than kindness. He'd given her a life worth living, children to love, and the profound joy of knowing that every sunrise brought another day with the family she'd never dared to dream she could have. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't seen you that day?" Thomas asked one morning as they watched their children play in the yard, their laughter carrying on the prairie wind. Elena smiled, settling more comfortably against his chest. "No," she said softly, "because I know you would have seen me. You have the kind of heart that notices when someone needs help, when someone needs hope. That's why I fell in love with you, Thomas McCready. Not because you saved me from the streets, but because you saw me when I thought I was invisible." "You were never invisible, mi amor," Thomas whispered, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You were just waiting for the right moment to shine." And as the sun rose over Cedar Ridge, painting the endless sky in shades of gold and rose, Elena McCready, wife, mother, beloved daughter of the frontier, knew that she was finally, completely, joyfully home. Epilogue 20 years later. Lucy McCready married the banker's son in the same little white church where her parents had pledged their practical union that had grown into the deepest love. Samuel had become a respected rancher in his own right, expanding the McCready holdings across half the county. But it was Thomas and Elena who remained the heart of Cedar Ridge. Their enduring love, a testament to the power of second chances and the magic that could grow from the simplest acts of human kindness. Delina, now a grandmother several times over, would still tell the story of how a single father with a lonely daughter had looked at a homeless woman and seen not a burden to be avoided, but a heart that needed warming. "You need a home," he'd said that day, though he'd offered her so much more. "My daughter needs her heart warmed," he'd said, though it was his own heart that had been transformed. And in the end, they'd all found exactly what they needed. Love that endured through every season, strong as the prairie wind and lasting as the endless western sky.